Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and brought to you by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance and DataFax. This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are giving back and making a difference so we can learn and do the same. We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose. Now here's our host, the CEO of City Current, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, powered by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance and also DataFax. We greatly appreciate you listening in because you are in for a fun one. More good. We always talk about our mission to power the good, and we are joined by someone who literally, like, if you look at her and you see her with the shirts and the slogans and everything, more good, it ties perfectly in. We have Mary Latham, and literally she's going all over the nation, gathering stories of good to be able to share. So let's start with Mary. How are you doing?
Good. I'm excited to be in Memphis.
Yes, we are a part of your journey for sure in our city. We're talking about how we have to get you out to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and all the amazing things here that are completely inspirational, but also to definitely need to be shared in even larger context. So for starters, let's back up. Let's kind of carry your story as a story. And a big part of this starts with Starbucks, a coworker of yours, standing in line and has a moment of generosity and is coming back and sharing it to you. We'll start there, but give us a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from New York, and I grew up in the end of Long Island, but did work in Manhattan for a few years. And I was working at a law firm at the time. I was an assistant, so it was kind of just a job to have health insurance and, afford the bills. I was nannying on the weeknights and photographing things on the weekends to afford the apartment you were never in New York. And I was working on the day of the Sandy Hook shooting, which was that morning. I was kind of just reading through the news, and my coworker had come back from Starbucks, and he was telling me, you should have come with me today, and I was ignoring him and staring at the news. And he said, I told him I didn't go because I couldn't afford it. And he said, it was free. And so obviously hearing that buzzword, I turned around and I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, yeah, there was a man in earlier buying gift cards because it was right before Christmas, December 14th, 2012. And he was buying gift cards, and he bought an extra one for $100 and said, run it out on the line behind me. And I was pretty surprised at this story. I mean, I can still see my friend's face. He was so excited, and he had just had such a terrible year. He was going through a divorce. He had lost his mom, and so seeing him so excited about this free $4 coffee from a total stranger was just really inspiring. And I got on the phone with my mom after he left my desk and told her, and then I kind of kept going on about the shooting and how could this happen and how is there so much bad out there. And she kind of said, Mary, got to focus on that other story you just told me, that coffee story, and how that guy did that and how cool that is. And, there's always going to be bad things and tragedies that will inevitably happen in our lives, but there'll always be more good if you look for it. So it was a conversation we had a couple weeks before she passed away from cancer. So kind of tried to carry those words that she told me with me, and decided I would pack up her old Subaru Outback and drive around the country and find that more good and look for it and highlight it and try to create something for the hospital waiting rooms, just because from her cancer I spent a lot of time in them. And, I was fortunate enough to have family with me, but there were people in there alone. There were people in there fighting. And I just thought it would be really nice to have, a book of hope, if you will, while you're in there to look through.
And I think it's amazing that out of tragedy, you're creating triumph. Out of darkness, you're trying to create light. And you're doing it in a way that is sharing other people's stories to then put it together in this book to be able to put it in the hospital waiting rooms to say, I know what it's like to sit there and to not have hope. And this is an opportunity for us to provide hope.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's just, it's so big when you lose someone, as, everyone's lost someone, to kind of carry that spirit on. And so for me, it was to try to help other people heal, but also help myself heal and kind of keep her spirit alive and just, honor her and who she was. And she was just total kindness.
So let's back it up even further. Talk about your childhood and especially with your mom and some of the things like traditions, but give us an idea of just your childhood.
So I grew up the bottom of 4 kids, bottom of the haystack, and I was very fortunate in that my siblings are all about 1.5 years apart, and then 5 years later I was born, so I got that feel of having siblings, but also being an only child while I was in high school. So once I hit 8th grade, which was actually when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, at the end of my 7th grade year, actually. And so I was the only kid home when she was going through all of that. And she hid a lot of it from me because I don't think she wanted to scare me, but we were always together. And so I think that was just really important, just having that time with her. And then also I had my appendix burst when I was in 11th grade, and, you know, I didn't know, and it was really bad. And by the time I got to the hospital, they were like, if you brought her in 5 hours later, she would be dead right now. So wow. I was in the hospital for a while too, and she every night was there with me, like, you know, sleeping in the chair next to me. So we just had a really close connection. I mean, my whole family is really close. My parents were married 40 years. I mean, I feel very, very lucky to have that kind of foundation, really.
So losing your mother, what did your family think of you going on this adventure? And were they super supportive and said, absolutely, let's do this? Or what were their thoughts on this?
You know, it was funny because the day I was leaving, my dad actually, we cremated my mom, but half the ashes went, you know, into the water near our home, and then the other half we buried, so that, you know, my dad wanted to be buried with my mom someday. And so we went by as my dad came with me to the ferry. I got on the cross-sand ferry and went to Connecticut. That was my first state. And so he rode the 10 minutes with me to the ferry, and on the way we stopped at the cemetery, and it was like super emotional and just sad, and we're sitting there, and, you know, he was just like giving me a half hug, and he was like, what do you think he'd be doing right now if mom was here? And I was like, well, not this crazy stuff, like, not this trip. But really, I mean, I feel like they're super supportive. Right after she had passed away, I bought a one-way ticket to the Caribbean and decided to try to take a leap of faith, do my wedding photography full-time, not do these 80 jobs to afford, you know, an apartment I can barely afford, but go somewhere that I could afford and do what I really wanted to do, and just start, just go out there and find something different, not really try to escape, if you will, but just start again. And so I figured nothing could be scarier than losing my mom at the time. So why not, you know, go off into the jungle with you only knowing one person and figuring it all out, because it's not as glamorous as it sounds to move to the Caribbean. But so I think since I had already done that, they knew I was going to do whatever these crazy things were that I was going to say. So they were just really supportive. I mean, I stay with strangers on this trip. I've been in 117 homes now across the country. So my dad definitely is on edge a little bit, but I call him every night at 6 o'clock Eastern time and let him know I'm still going along. But so I think that they're very trusting of me, and I'm obviously very trusting of people. And yeah, it's definitely, you got to have some faith. So we all are pretty close, and they're very supportive.
So let's talk about 117 cities. So let's start with this adventure. So you go off on the ferry, and Connecticut being the first. Talk about kind of how this is evolving and the process, because obviously, as you said, it's very fluid, and you're just figuring this out as you go somewhat. There is a method to the madness, but walk us through kind of as you're going along. And obviously, as you said, it can be a scary first step where it's like, I don't really know what to expect, but I'm just going to go on this journey, and whatever happens, happens, and I'm going to learn in the process. So carry it in terms of like taking that first step and how this works.
So when I started, I made a little video. My friend had a drone, and he helped me out take some footage of the car, and because the car is obviously, it was my mom, so it's playing just as big of a role. But I said, if anyone has an aunt in Texas or a cousin in California or a friend in Pennsylvania that would let me crash on their couch as I traveled through, let me know. Obviously, finding shelter is priority before I figure out all my stories and everything. And so people started tagging people. And the beginning of the trip, like as I traveled through Connecticut, it was, you know, an old coworker's aunt or a friend's cousin or something. I didn't know them, but there was a connection.
Yeah. So at least they're somewhat trusted and vetted, so to speak, through people that you know and trust a little bit. So yeah. So that was a network
for the first 6.
Right.
And then by the 7th host,
now it's anything goes.
Then it was anything goes. Yeah. So by the 7th host, a woman reached out from Maine. And she reached out via Facebook, so I was able to click on her picture, which, I mean, I don't always do, but As I said, it's a game of trust. But I clicked on her picture, and she had this sun hat on, and her hair was flowing, and she was riding a bike through like a blueberry bog with her puppy in the front basket. And I was like, this is obviously either a children's author and the nicest woman in the world, or a serial killer. Only one or the other. There was no in between. And so I figured I'd see for myself. And so I ended up at her house. I was
so part of this is just natural curiosity. Like, I'm just going to go for this.
Well,
like,
I thought it was so cool. I was like, this woman doesn't know me at all. She read a little article in her newspaper, and she's going to let me in her home. And she, like, there was no connection. So,
I feel like this could be like the inspirational video or like a horror film. You could go one of the two directions with this.
Yeah, it's hit or miss. We have 15 states left. I'll let you know when I get through all. But yeah, I get there, and it was December. It was in the beginning of my trip, so it was December of 2016. It was cold and dark in Maine, and I get there around 6:00 at night, and she lives in this old 200-year-old farm home. So it was like this old white house with a little blue door. And so I pull up to the driveway. There's like a tree swing, and I go and knock on the door, and I just hear her voice go, "Come in." And so I push the door open, and the heat of the house just comes out. Her little wood stove is going. She was making this big dinner, some Italian dinner, so the smell of like a home-cooked meal when you've been eating beef jerky on the side of the road. And so it was just this like really amazing feeling, and I walked in, and the record player was playing Eva Cassidy, which not a lot of people that I knew at the time. And my mom used to always play when she would make dinner. Wow. And like loved Eva Cassidy. And so for all of it, and she just her puppy runs up to me, and she walks out of the kitchen, and she just gives me this huge hug and is smiling, and it's just like, I was like, "Mom, are you here?" Like, it was just this amazing, beautiful feeling. And like, obviously you have to be careful and, figure out when you're going places. I always get places in the daylight when I arrive to homes I don't know, because, to make sure that everything's okay. And if I don't feel comfortable, I can always leave. But I've never had to leave. I've never felt uncomfortable. And, you stay in some homes where, like her, like she totally mommed me and like made me muffins with the raspberries from her garden in the morning and everything. Or you stay in homes where maybe you're supposed to be there and to help them. Maybe they're going through something, and, you just spending a couple days with them. Or really just, the whole trip, it's such a spectrum of, you get some really grandiose stories of these amazing things, but then sometimes you meet with people and maybe you're just supposed to meet with them by random connection to listen to them for a few hours. I think that's the biggest problem right now, is that we all just want to be listened to, and no one's really listening, and we're all going through something, but we're so stuck in our own thing that we're going through that we forget maybe they're going through something too. Maybe they didn't lose their mom, but maybe they don't have legs, or maybe their sister died in an accident, or maybe they have some kind of disease that they have to cope with every single day. We're all battling something. And so sometimes I just sit and I talk with people. Sometimes I get these amazing stories. Sometimes I stay with someone that's like, let me take you for a massage, and sometimes I'm taking them out to dinner. You never really know, but it's just it's been very very much more than I thought it would be when I started.
And in a cool way, you do get to see the best in people. You're genuinely walking in having no idea what to expect, obviously, but yet when you meet them and you see it, and whether you're just there to listen or you're there to absorb and hear a story and learn more, either way, you get to see kind of the best, because you're walking in as totally an outsider, and yet they're making you literally a part of their home. And just looking online, you have some amazing videos and stories of everything from one of the coffee shops to giving you not only stuff that you could take, but giving you coffee to then give to the people that you were going to stay with. So giving you something to gift to them as a thank you. And then even an Uber, driver that you were basically in D.C. and just kind of going through, and you didn't necessarily want to go, but you popped in the Uber, and all of a sudden the guy starts sharing an amazing story that you had no expectation of.
Yeah.
And so you just happen chance run across these stories of people just sharing amazing things that have happened in their lives or in the life of a friend, and those become a part of you and your story.
Yeah. The coolest part really right now during this time is that no one talks to me about politics, because it's like this breath of fresh air that I'm coming into their homes, and they know I have some stories of kindness, and they want to hear those, and they want to hear about the other things. And the spectrum of the people that I stay with, I try to stay with Trump supporters, Hillary supporters, Bernie supporters, atheists, super religious people. I'm in a Jewish home now. Like, it's all over. And so really it's just that constant knowledge that, we're all human beings. We're all capable of kindness. And so that's been just like really awesome for me, that it's almost so not political that it is political. Like, remember the politics of kindness and just like getting along.
Politics of the heart. I mean, this is all heart work. Talk about, maybe give us one or two of, not your favorites because you can't pick a favorite child, but give us one or two stories that are ones that you think that listeners would either be inspired by or just that you want to share or top of mind. Give us a couple.
Okay, so I mean, let's see. There was a kid that always stands out for me that I stayed in when I was in Massachusetts. I stayed with a woman who worked in the hospital there. And so one of the families that she had known had a son, and I think he was about 7 when he was diagnosed with cancer, and he went into remission afterwards, and he was doing better, but he had a really hard time with it. And his mom said, what do you want to do to celebrate? And we could go to Chuck E. Cheese every Friday this month, or we could go to Disney World, or like, how do you want to celebrate this? And he said, you know what, Mom, like, I just want to like go like get a bunch of toys and like bring them to the other kids that still have to go there every day. So he had this like huge toy drive, and he dressed up like Captain America, and he brought all his toys in to all the kids there. And it was just so cool because like when you talk to little kids, it's like, I don't know when we lose that, like, the empathy and the compassion, but it was just, It was such an awesome thing. And he was adorable. And then you get the grandiose stories of, there was a teacher in Virginia Beach who overheard her students talking before class one day. And one of them was saying, the aunt was on dialysis and she was really not doing well and low on the list. And the teacher went to the local hospital after school and got tested and was a match and donated her kidney to her student's aunt that she had never met. So, there's the really cute, inspiring people, the amazing, inspiring adults that go through some tragedy. There's that. But one thing that just happened when I was in Nashville, actually, and I feel like it's really the kind of story that I try to emphasize on this mission. I stayed with a couple in Nashville that the husband's friend was hanging out with us that weekend. His family had gone away, and so he had more freedom time, and so he was spending some time with us. So I was probably spent 3 days with this person, telling stories, explaining things, And on the third day, we were at lunch, and we were all sitting there talking, and he was just talking to me, and he said, and he took out his wallet, and he's like, I meant to tell you this thing that had happened once to me. About 8 years ago, I was traveling with my wife, and we were visiting a different city, and I guess when we were getting into the car to leave, my wallet fell out. And I didn't know at the time, I didn't know where I could have lost it, but I wasn't thinking like on the side of the road. And so I was all bummed looking for it everywhere. And a couple days later, it shows up in the mail. And I guess they had taken my ID out and seen my address, and so they mailed it to me. But not only did they do that, they realized when they looked at the ID that my birthday had been a few days ago. And so when I opened up my wallet, there was this tiny little purple birthday card with a little birthday cake on it. And you open it up and it said, I found this wallet on 1700 Murphy Lane. Happy birthday. And and it's all crinkled up and, and it's in his wallet. And he said, yeah, and I've kept it in my wallet for the last 8 years. And as a reminder that there's good people out there. And I was like sitting there like, Jay, I've been talking to you for 3 days about these stories.
Right. Why is this story just now?
Why are you just telling me this now? Like, you didn't think of this right away? And he's like, well, you're doing something on such a grand scale. I didn't think, this was just such a little thing. But that's the problem, like, we all think that an act of kindness is, donating a kidney or paying for, a $100 tip for the waitress or this or that, these huge acts. But it really is just these tiny little things that just show like you are aware, you're paying attention, you're observing what's going on around you, and you're helping where you can, how you can. Yeah. And if that's just smiling at someone, that could be changing someone's day. It could be changing someone's life. I mean, just paying attention to people. So I really try to emphasize those stories because they're huge, and I hope that by telling those stories, it inspires people to do those kind of things more.
Thank you for listening to our ChangeMakers podcast. City Current is a catalyst of over 100 partners joining forces and funds to power the good through free events, positive media, and philanthropy. If you like our efforts and you're looking to power the good with us, follow us on social media at City Current and check out our website at citycurrent.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen. And if you know a changemaker, please reach out and let us know so we can consider them for a future show. The ChangeMakers podcast is brought to you by DataFacts. DataFacts is a national provider of trusted background screening products such as criminal searches, drug screening, employment and education verifications, and post-hire monitoring to employers of all sizes.
DataFacts is one of the few background screeners that holds the stringent National Association of Professional Background Screeners accreditation. They're certified by the WBENC as a 100% woman-owned business, and in 2018, they were ranked by HRO Today's Baker's Dozen customer satisfaction ratings as one of the top background screeners in the nation. You are in good hands with DataFacts. Visit datafacts.com to learn more and make sure to mention the ChangeMakers podcast. And now, back to the show.
And I think especially like even in that case, the person who sent the wallet may or may not ever know the joy that it brings and the fact that he now carries that birthday note with him, with him everywhere. Like that's a part of him now. So my point is, in many cases, you do these moments of generosity, and they might seem, to your point, small, insignificant, a quick moment, but yet, to your point, the impact that it has on the other, you'll never know the ripple effect, but that creates and sets in motion the butterfly effect, where it's like everything you do will set in motion a whole nother set of events. And so that small event then creates this where it's like, wait a second, I lose my wallet, and then all of a sudden not only do I get to send it back, but they take the time to notice something small like that. I carry that forward. Well, now I want to help and do something for someone else. And so I think that's the part that in many cases gets overlooked, is those small moments set in motion very large movements that just create empathy and opportunity for us to love one another and be more compassionate with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. They light a spark.
Yes, there you go. Yes.
I wish every day that I could find that guy. That it's funny because a year into my trip, when I had to go back to New York for work, I went to look at that Starbucks. It was on 54th and Broadway, and it was right near the building I worked at. And I thought maybe I could figure out, the receipts from that date. Like maybe somehow I'd be able to figure out who that guy was. But it was gone. They had closed that Starbucks. And so I was like, this must be a sign. But I just think it would be so cool someday if, this man is in the hospital for a good reason. Hopefully his daughter's having a baby or something. And he opens up this book and he sees that was him.
Right.
Like he was the one at the Starbucks. And for him, he didn't even buy me a coffee. He bought someone I knew a coffee. And I've stopped my entire life to, honor that act and continue it and stuff. All because of one little thing that he did that day. And so, yeah, it's like you never know who you're impacting or what kind of ripple effect could come from the good that you're doing.
I think part of that too for us as a society is being focused on that. So in other words, we can very easily focus on the negative, right? That it's so pervasive. The 10 o'clock news, everywhere you look, there's negative energy. But to your mom's point and what you're doing, focus on the good, more good. And also too, the point is that when you do start looking for moments that you can make a difference in, you become, instead of a bystander where you're just kind of standing by, you become an upstander. Yeah. And you hear Facing History Ourselves, classify that as someone who raises their hand and you step in, you stand up for something, you're an upstander. But my point is whether it's, and we were recently at a graduation class for a bunch of young women, and many of them had fathers, but one of them didn't, and they're about to start a dance. And something as simple as that, where it's like you look in and this poor young lady doesn't have her father, doesn't have a date. Well, that's a moment that someone can step in and be that hero for her, right? Yeah. Insignificant moment maybe to somebody else who steps in, but a major moment for her. Mm-hmm. And, luckily on this one, I couldn't even see that she didn't have one, but my wife was like, hey, boom, like there. And so I stepped in. But the point is that there are moments like that for all of us every single day. We can step in and do something, whether it's opening the door for somebody, mm-hmm. Picking up litter in a parking lot, whatever it is, something very simple. But yet we have to be intentional about looking for those moments and saying, it's not somebody else's responsibility, it's mine.
Right, yeah.
So I think part of what you're doing is you're creating that ethos, that energy of let's celebrate these moments and also look for what might seem small to you is actually very large, because in the context of what it does, it changes you as a person.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think about that all the time. I can't see, I'm trying to think of a better word than, I don't know if you're allowed to curse on this, but basically an a-hole. I can't see them anymore now. I mean, because every time someone's doing something that's like really annoying or frustrating or not okay or this or that, I'm like, well, what's going on with them? Or what happened in their childhood? Or how did we get to this spot for them? Just because of all the things you see as you travel. And it's such a much lovelier way to live when you can try to understand someone instead of just immediately judge them and just assume the worst in them. And I feel like when you do focus on the good and stuff, and it's not like, I'm, for some people who don't completely understand what I'm doing, if they think I'm just, driving around, it must be so wonderful. You're driving around collecting happy stories and getting to see the country, blah, blah, blah.
Well, and you've had a lot of like kind of negative naysayers and people have said, oh, well, it must be great to do this and da-da-da-da. And I think even with that, you've taken that negative energy and looked at it in a positive way.
Right. Well, it definitely makes you appreciate the people that, like, when you get to their house, they just give you a hug and they're like, do you need to take a nap? Like, what do you need? Like, because they're forgetting to self-care, which, of course, you forget to do when you live in a car, basically. But I just think it's really important that we, like, with this trip, I feel like all these stories, even when they're beautiful stories, are coming from a place of darkness or tragedy. And even if it's just something we're going through, even that little story, he lost his wallet. Like, it's frustrating and it's annoying, but then that's why he was so tuned into that kindness. So it's almost like when we're in these vulnerable places and stuff, that the kindness, we become so much more aware of it. But it's not to say that there's not a lot of stuff going on in everyone's lives that, these stories, it's extremely emotional because I'm putting out there, look at this family, they lost their child, but they've sent all these other kids to school on a scholarship and they visit them on the holidays, and how beautiful is that? But that's what I'm putting out, but I'm also sitting in that home for a couple hours with that family, going through scrapbooks, looking at their son and like crying with them. And so it's definitely extremely emotional, but that's not what I choose to only put out, because I think the good stuff is what we need to see more, because we already all know that things are not always great and everything, but we do need to see and be inspired by, well, look, this family went through this, but look what they created. What could I create with whatever pain I'm in, But yeah, so it's a roller coaster of emotions. I'm usually bawling in the car as I drive down the road if I've had a sad story.
How is this, man? This is a tough question to answer, but I'll throw it out there. How has this changed you?
I would say it's definitely been quite a punch in the face of perspective. I think that when I started off, I was like, I'm so sad. My mom died. This stinks. And I was frustrated, but I wanted to honor her. But I was in this weird place. And then I started staying in these homes. And, I stayed in a home with a woman who had severe colitis and was really, really sick all the time. And, her son, she had two sons, but one of them had something wrong with him. He was having all these surgeries all the time, at a very, facial dysfunctions and stuff, like things, parents' worst nightmare, that they're going to have the kid go through school at a time like this where bullying is such a huge thing. And if you saw her with her other son at the grocery store, you would think, look at that beautiful woman and her nice kid. And you would have no idea that what she was going through, what her kid was going through, how sick she was. And so staying in their home and just kind of seeing their day-to-day for a few days, I mean, it really, all the different people and everything there, like I said, everyone's going through something. And so it definitely makes you realize, like, okay, I'm going through something, but this person's going through something really serious. Like, it just kind of, it grounds you and just really gives you a lot of perspective. So I would say that's definitely been a huge lesson, but really just listening to people, and just, I mean, as cliche as it is, just being kind. I would say smiling as much as possible. I think that's my best interview technique, is just smiling at people, because if someone's about to open up and tell you these stories and talk about their lives, they want to feel comfortable. And when you're kind of just like staring at them, that's terrifying. It's like when I talk to high school kids and they are staring at me and I'm like, do you want to kill me? Do you want to be on your Snapchat? Are you looking through my soul? I don't know. So that feeling of just connecting and smiling. I just feel like if everyone just smiled a little bit more.
What about, I feel like you've probably made so many friendships that, I mean, obviously you're bouncing around, so you have a moment of where it's kind of this really intense moment, in other words, where you're opening up and they're opening up, and so you create this really strong relationship, although it's only maybe for 24 to 48 hours or a little bit longer, but it's a short duration, intense moment to create a friendship and a bond. And then you're moving to the next and the next and the next. but along the way, their story becomes your story and vice versa. And so what about like keeping in touch with them? And like, in other words, as you create your network and your network is constantly expanding, how are you managing those relationships?
So there's definitely some hosts that like are really good at staying in touch, especially if they're on Facebook and stuff. Not all my hosts are on Facebook. And so, which I admire, but I feel like if they're on there, then they're more apt to reach out or comment on stuff that I'm posting. Some of them will send a text here and there. But like one of them in Rhode Island, who was another one that reached out from something in the Providence Journal, totally random. I stayed with her for a night, and she, we had a great time, but I really didn't get to talk to her that much. And a couple months went by, and then I got an email from her, and she said she had heart surgery, and leading up to her heart surgery, she had to like be in really good shape. So she was going to the local gym every morning or something. And she said, and every day she would wear her more good shirt to get her through it and be like, the surgery is going to be okay, and like stay positive and everything. And it was just this tiny little email, and like it totally made my like week. I just kept thinking about that, and it was just such an awesome thing. So I think that even if I don't get to stay in touch with them as much as I would like to, or maybe that they would like to, we're still kind of always thinking about each other. I feel like it was my hosts have played such a massive role in this journey. I think when I started, it was just like, okay, a safe place to sleep. But really, it's like, it's huge. I mean, I'm traveling alone, and so to get into these homes that make you feel so comfortable and feel like family and put you up and take care of you, it's, I think, I got into one home and the woman was like, oh, I didn't know if you had like a pillow already, but I bought a pillow because I didn't know if you'd want my old pillow. So there's a new pillow in your bedroom, but you probably have a pillow, right? Like there must be some things you carry around for comfort items or something. And I was like, you know what? It's funny. I don't. Like, a pillow's great and everything, but like that's not going to save me. So really the comfort item is you. Like I walk into your home and you're smiling and you look friendly and nice. That's my comfort item. Like I'm not like carrying certain things. Like that's just stuff. So, but it was funny. And so, yeah, they've played a really big role, and definitely some of them had stayed in touch, and I can't wait. I would love at the end of this, if I was ever able to make it happen, to host the hosts and have them all meet each other, because there's so many of them. I mean, even right now, the woman I'm staying with, it reminds me so much of a woman that I stayed with in Spokane, Washington. And like, there's just been so much of that where I'm like, oh, this person would really get along with this person, or, Well,
there is a common thread of just generosity and being willing, even on their end, to accept someone who they don't know into their home, and to want to put their best foot forward in terms of hosting you and accepting you in. So I think there's a common thread of just an open heart and generosity among your hosts that would connect all of them. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, it's just amazing. And I stayed with one woman at one point, and she, when I got there, kind of hesitated to tell me, because I asked her, what inspired you to reach out to me? Because she also reached out from, I don't even know where she had found me. Of course, I just show up at her house anyway. Again, my dad, poor thing. He's freaking out all the time. But I show up at her house, and, she really hesitated to tell me at first, but she said she connected because our moms had both passed away. And then she finally said, but my mom was murdered. And I realized in the next couple of days with staying with her that she was consumed by that, situation. Of course. I mean, I have a hard enough time getting through what I got through, and I have all the answers for the most part. I mean, it's just this mystery that's kind of been unsolved, and, just being with her for a few days, and she always had the news on, which I don't watch the news because I would not get out of my car. But she always had the news on, or Dateline, or these like murder shows, and she was so consumed by it, and it was just so crazy to me watching her that she would let this complete stranger in her home if she's so terrified of everything and everyone. But here she was, trying and letting this person into their home and trying to hear about that good stuff. And so it was really amazing to me that she did that, because, I mean, everyone, I'm always like, you just let me in. Thank you so much. And it's great. And we get along great. But for her, it must have been really huge for her to do something like that. And so that was pretty cool.
Well, what's interesting that you bring up is that they look at it as a healing moment for them too.
Yeah.
So in other words, is a part of themselves opening up, sharing. It's part of their therapy, so to speak, to invite you in and to be able to share. So even on both ends, it's therapeutic.
Yeah, and when you stay with them at first, they're like, oh, I mean, I don't stay with people that necessarily have stories. I'm just staying with someone that's offering shelter, which is something that people always confuse. But But of course, everyone has a story. Everyone has a story.
Yeah.
So once you start talking to them, you hear these stories, and it's just so funny because at first when you arrive, they're like, I don't know, have I done any kindness? Which really isn't the concept. It's did people do kindness for you? But and then they're thinking and they don't know, and they're like, well, who in my community? But by the end, they're like, oh, this person does this, and I talked to my friend, and she knew about this, and then they go and meet with me and the person, and then they're seeing all this stuff, and it's just, and then they're thinking about their own life, and what is this kindness that's happened to me in my life? So all of a sudden, they're reflecting on all the good stuff in their life. They're seeing all the good stuff in their community. So it's kind of like you're kind of giving them this opportunity to open their eyes around what's going on and see it, and so that's really cool to watch.
And I think, too, and I know this is already happening, but as you start opening the floodgates, more and more stories. So regardless of you going to them, the stories from all over will come to you of just being, hey, this is what happened to me, and this is what has inspired me to go and do other things or whatever. So in other words, you become then this huge pipeline for positive stories where you're not necessarily even physically seeking them out, but they're coming to you because you've created the foundation and the place to share those and to do something with those stories.
Right, yeah.
So I think that's a cool piece of this too. So talk about some of the states that are left. So maybe for those who are listening, hey, there's a chance to help be a conduit and a connective piece of that. But then also too, ultimately, like you mentioned kind of the end goal, but what's your time frame and how can we help kind of bring this to fruition? What can we do?
So the states I have left, I go to Chicago next. So Illinois, and then Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. I'm trying to think of, and then Alaska and Hawaii, and then I'm kind of close towards home. So West Virginia, and then Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. And so after I finish the 50 states, what I would really love to see happen is to kind of have the mission get some type of exposure where even more people would know. So let's say I was in New Mexico. I know you want to go on the Ellen Show. That's a piece of this. It's like a dream, yes. I love her. And I feel like all of her viewers are so awesome. Like, I know they would take the time to write the stories. Because right now, I mean, this trip is like, I'm strapping my boots on and going out there and like
so the goal
looking
really
for my
be
stories.
Like Ellen Show now, and then later something like Oprah where like everybody get a book. So that way you get a book, you get a book,
you get a book. Yes.
Yeah,
that would be a dream. But yeah, just some type of exposure to really get the project heard, so that if I went to a state that someone lived in that wants to be part of this, they can still email me the stories. I mean, I always tell people you can always email the stories, but they can email the stories. So the story, like the woman that donated her kidney in Virginia Beach, something that's like a really quick, concise story, I can have those types of things in the book, and maybe it would be volume 1 of a book that I could update in these hospitals.
Right.
And, you know, the front page would be all the thumbnail images of every person across the country in their mortgage shirt that let me in. I even give the babies onesies. And then the intro of what this was. And then just the stories. And maybe like Tom's shoes, how you can like buy a pair, it donates a pair. Because people always say, I want this on my coffee table or, you know, in my eye doctor's office. So you could buy one on Amazon, but then it would donate one. You could pick what state and hospital. That was always like a thing I thought would be really cool. And then I would write my own, you know, chapter book basically of this entire journey and this whole experience and all the kindness that I received, the people that I stayed with, you know, like all of it in like a separate kind of story. So that's as far as I've gotten because it feels really far away still.
Well, and obviously you want to get to all 50 states, so that needs to be the first piece of this. But then as you're going along, and to your point, this can become a book that almost like every few years you can have an updated version of it because, like I said, once you open those floodgates, so many more stories, and especially once you have a book where it's a self-perpetuating book in terms of you're encouraging more stories to come to you, then you really have a very sustainable, and I love that one-for-one model that really for many, many years to come, this could be a huge piece of your legacy.
Yeah, it'd be like a little more good ambassadors in every state.
Yeah. Well, and share from that standpoint, you do have shirts and sweatshirts and all sorts of stuff that all have more good. Mm-hmm. Talk about that and how that kind of helps, and even just simple donations helps fuel, because I know that, you know, when you talk about driving your mother's car, it's broken down. Mm-hmm. You've got to get that fixed. You've got gas. You've got food. I mean, there's a lot of bills that add up pretty fast for you to be able to do what you're doing.
Yeah, so I did a GoFundMe for my gas in the beginning of the trip, and I still have that running, or people can like Venmo or PayPal or whatever technique there are these days. But I started selling the t-shirts and sweatshirts just to kind of alleviate, because I give out the t-shirts to the hosts. So to kind of pay for that, I started selling them. So basically when you're buying a shirt or a sweatshirt, you're, helping a host, not helping a host, but
I got one for me and my wife. So yes, we ordered ours too.
You will have to send a picture of that. But yeah, basically it's you're supporting the hosts by buying that and supporting me, so that I'm not dishing out money every time I do that. And yeah, it's just kind of sometimes you're getting a story and the person buys you the coffee or buys you the dinner. It's just super random. I had a really cool experience when I was in New Hampshire, where the person I stayed with gave me a check for $500, and he said, if you need a new tire or something like that, use this on yourself. But I love what you're doing, but he was a doctor. He's like, I can't go out there and I can't do it and try to, see what you're going to see. So if you see someone that, maybe can't afford their meal or this or that, like now that can be like your little fund for that. So that was really cool, because I do always want to do that, but I'm also like, oh, I have to save for gas and this and this. So then I was able to do that as I was traveling through. Like I was just kind of really paying attention. I was like, I'm going to pay for that person or this or that, or do whatever little things. But yeah, it was kind of like the coffee people that were like, not just thinking about you, but they were thinking about like the people that you'll meet along the journey and stuff. But, and then, I did have car trouble unbeknownst to me, when I was in California, and, my car seemed to be running fine, but a man that I had spoken at a Rotary Club there happened to come up to me after I spoke and said, when was the last time you got your car checked on? And I mean, my dad does make sure I'm checking my tire pressure and my oil all the time, but I knew I had to rotate my tires. You're supposed to rotate them every 5,000 miles, and I mean, no one ever really does, but on this trip I was like, I probably should try to keep on track of that. So I told him I think I needed to rotate my tires, and he was like, well, listen, I own a transportation company. I have a top mechanic that comes in Fridays. Why don't you bring it in? So I had just arrived to my host the night before, total stranger. She gives me the keys to her car. She's like, you can go collect your story today with this. And they take my car, and at 5:00 they send a car over to her house to pick me up, bring me back, and the car is like shining. They have washed and waxed it. They changed my oil, rotated the tires, fixed my headlight, fixed my transmission, put new wipers on the front and back, like probably like $2,500 worth of work. And he was like, off you go. I believe in what you're doing, and I think it's awesome. And off I drove, crying as I drove down the road. But yeah, so little things like that happen, which is really awesome. I mean, just like having that support and having people just like want to hear these stories and see it. I mean, I think everyone wants to see good right now and wants to hear more of these stories.
I agree 100%. What advice would you give to just anyone listening to help open their eyes and how they can be a part of more good in terms of not just what you're doing, but just in genuinely putting out love, positive energy, good energy back into the world? So what advice would you give us to just be a positive influence in somebody's life?
I think really just the paying attention concept. This past December, actually, it was 5 years at that point, I think, since, 6 years, since the Sandy Hook shooting and since that man bought the coffee and inspired me to do my thing. So I tried to I'd start a little project, a little project in between doing this big project wasn't enough. I thought, let's do another one. So I thought I would start something called the 100 Movement, where I would inspire people. It was called that because my story revolved around the 100, but I encourage people, if they could spend $100, but if they could only spend $5 or, just a smile, to do something for a stranger. And so a lot of people did like the coffee concept. They just bought the things and ran it out on the lines behind them. But, there were some really creative, cool things. And one teacher actually had her students hand out $5 gift cards. They were all like, all these little kids were in front of the local coffee shop handing them out to strangers. And it was cute because they took a video of it. So you're seeing the people being like, wait, what? Thank you. Like, what is this for? But one girl was walking down the street in New York, and she was just looking around, and she said she was like really nervous, and she was like kind of uncomfortable. She's like, I don't know what I'm going to do, and this and that. She's trying to figure it out, and she was stressed out about it. And then she looked in a hair salon, and there was this old woman. She was getting her hair cut, and she had 2 broken wrists from pickleball, apparently. And she walked into the hair salon and paid for her haircut. And so I thought that one was so cool because it wasn't just doing kindness for a stranger, but it was that concept of just looking around us. I mean, there is need everywhere.
Being a noticer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just kind of, that would be my biggest advice. Just paying attention. If you're seeing someone, you know, especially if you're a kid right now in high school or something like that, like just like opening the door for someone. I mean, I read a story when I was in high school that has stuck with me ever since and has been such a huge thing that I've thought about on this mission too. It was a boy who was walking home from school, and he was going home and he was going to kill himself. He had planned the whole thing out, and he was walking home and he was holding all his books, and he tripped on the sidewalk and he dropped them. And there was a girl across the street, and she ran over and she helped him pick up the books, and then they happened to both be walking in the same direction for the next 10 minutes, and they just started talking and got to know each other. And he didn't kill himself that day. And, you know, he writes this short story years later. I can't remember the name or anything. I just remember reading it when I was in junior high school and being like, oh my gosh, like, we really have this power that we don't even realize to be affecting other people's lives if we just care and just show, you know, some...
Well, and I think too, and I don't remember the saying of it, but the point is what you focus on and what you measure or whatever it is you intentionally focus on becomes a part of it. And my point is, like for our kids, in many cases, especially with our younger one, you can ask them, well, how was your day at school? And be like, fine. What'd you do? What'd you learn? I don't know, the same. Versus, hey, did you do anything kind for anyone? You know, what was something nice that you said to somebody? Did you open the door for anybody? So in other words, leading in with something that has a heart pull. And at first they're kind of like, wait, what? And then all of a sudden they know that that's what you're going to ask for. And so they start focusing on that themselves and like, yeah, I opened the door for the teacher. Yeah. Or I said something nice to you know, this guy or this girl. But my point is what you start focusing on, even as a parent to your child, will help them kind of craft that behavior of kindness and empathy. And so I think that's where, for all of us, to your point, being intentional, but also even being intentional on what we kind of teach others and focus on becomes a big part of what we as a society then focus on. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And just maybe putting our phones down. Really, like, putting our phones down, I feel like, is one of the biggest things right now, because that's like showing the least attention or observing anything around you when you're in front of your child and just like on your phone all the time. I feel like then they're learning that, and we're wondering why they're all on their phones, and it's like that's what they're growing up into. That's all they know. They're basically coming out of the womb on Snapchat and people are taking videos. It's like that's all they know now because of that. So I stayed with a family in Houma, Louisiana, and they had this little box that said be present. It was like this wooden box the 15-year-old had made, and there was a couple kids in the family, and they would come home from school and they would throw all their stuff, their iPads and their phones or their laptops or whatever, in there for the first few hours when they got home from school and did their homework and talked to their mom, and they were like the best, loveliest family ever. But it was so cool because it's like, it's that concept of just being present and realizing all these little things that will take that away from us. And
so normally we would do a lightning round, and this is where we would ask like questions about your favorite movie and book and all those kind of things. But I think given the fact that like literally you just travel nonstop, we'll keep it fairly short and sweet on this. So we'll switch to lightning round. Just it's short questions, short answers. Just fun chance to get to know you a little better. Let's start with what's a favorite meal for you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that is impossible because people are always asking me that. And I'm like, honestly, I just appreciate food. Thank you so much. I'll eat what you want. Like, I just want you to be happy. But I would say I do love like tacos and a margarita. Like, I feel like the Mexican theme.
Simple, but that works. Tacos and margaritas. All right. So what on your end, what do you do to relax? Is there such a thing at this point?
Is there a thing? I usually watch an episode of The Office or something before I'm about to go to bed in whatever home I'm in. I feel like just like something really easy and light and funny. Or just like read a chapter of a book or something like that. But yeah, or try to find water. Anywhere I am, I always try to like find somewhere pretty that has some water, whether it's like a little pond or a lake or the ocean or anything, and just like sit there for as long as I can while I'm driving, just to kind of like take it in and get a minute to myself.
What's been one of your favorite cities?
New Orleans.
Why?
I feel like just like the energy there was really awesome. I also, and I can never plan when I get places, but I was there during French Quarter Fest. So there was just like the kids playing music outside on the street, people dancing in the street. One of the stories I collected was a woman that was recording an album at the time, made time to like pause that, come out, talk to me and everything, tell me a story of how, like, where she was before all that. I just thought that was really cool when people make time for this, because again, it's just like, I'm a very like small grassroots situation here just on my own. So she was just making time for me and supporting what I was doing, which I thought was really cool.
What's a neat place or a restaurant, but just something that stands out, you know, in your travels that's been just a cool experience?
The Shack Up Inn in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which
Wow.
we're so close to.
I was about to say, yeah,
we're so
very
close, and I'm like, I want to go back, because it was like 2 years ago that I was there, and now I'm like an hour and a half from it, but still so much more to do.
If Chicago's your next trip, you're going the wrong direction.
Yeah,
but
I know,
hey.
yeah. But yeah, that I stayed in a grain bin. That was awesome.
When you're traveling, what type of music do you like to listen to?
Sometimes I just blast some rap music to get pumped up. But I kind of listen to everything. I mean, it also depends too. Like, I was going through Omaha, I was listening to Christian rock because that's what was on the radio. My CD player barely works and my Bluetooth doesn't connect to my phone to play music. So I'm really just listening to the radio, or, you know, catching up with people on my headset, or just processing what I just heard, because half the time I could be driving for an hour or two and not even turn the radio on or put the window down yet, because you're kind of just taking it all in, and it's your only time that you're alone.
What's one, when you are back with your family, either a tradition or something that you enjoy?
I mean, I really love being by the water. So just like ever being on a beach, and growing up on Long Island, we were on the beach basically. Like here, everything's on the beach. But yeah, I would say just like, I don't know, it sounds so cheesy, but like sunsets and the beach and like hanging out with friends or a bonfire or something like that.
Simple. Hey, I like it. So more of a deep question, but kind of as a wrap up, you're doing this, you're creating your legacy every day, but when you look back 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now and beyond, what do you hope that people say about you and what you're doing with More Good?
I mean, I think just people, if they, you know, sometimes I'll post something and someone else will do something because they read the post and they got inspired to do something, whether it was something I had done for someone, whether it was talking about a story someone had done and they said, you know what, that's a really cool idea. I'm going to try to start that in my town. I don't really mind so much if my name gets forgotten. I feel like it's just the more good theme of the concept that, you know, maybe we're just one person, but we have this power to make a difference and an impact, and, you know, we all do. And so to just do that more and to just inspire more and just be a kind person, really, I mean, just keep that current of positivity that's always going on that keeps us really going. I mean, we're so focused on all the negative stuff going on in the world, but I mean, the world would actually really not be going if there wasn't this current of good that we could be focusing on a little bit more too. We're just so wrapped up and drowning in the negativity that if we kind of changed our focus, I feel like, and did, you know, be part of the solution instead of the problem and just complaining, be part of the solution and start doing more good stuff.
Love it. So tell us where we can go, website, social media, where would you direct listeners?
So moregoodtoday.com is the website. And yeah, there's ways to, you know, buy a t-shirt or send an email if you know people in the next couple states I have to go to, or know people with stories, or really any suggestions or ideas of ways to help me as I keep going and can connect to as many people as possible.
Well, Mary, you are a change maker. Like I said, the beautiful thing is you are turning darkness into light, tragedy over to triumph, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal. So we definitely wish you safety and all the best, and we look forward to being a part of your conversation and storyline as you move forward. So we'll help celebrate it even on our end, and especially once you get the book out, we're going to be a big part of that too. We will be a part of that journey for sure, but we wish you all the best of luck, and definitely listeners, make sure and get involved with More Good. Mary, thanks for all you're doing for being on ChangeMakers podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and brought to you by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance and DataFacts. To learn more about our guests and to share your stories of others leading by example, visit us online at citycurrent.com and follow us on social media using @citycurrent. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen. Now, think big, start small, and act now. Be a change maker.